Good evening, everybody. Episode 26 of a brand new year, 2020, year of getting your life into clear vision and focus. I am so excited to start this brand new year with conversations with an extraordinary person, someone I was blessed to have as a teacher myself, and get to share with all of you guys now, Mike Spatola. And we're going to talk tonight about Carpe Diem in January and the manifesting with the magical guide to bliss and dreams realized through the curious mind. So I'm going to let things start on Facebook Live, make sure that we're on and make sure everything is going as accordingly planned, because we had a couple blips before, but I think we're going to be fine. And let's see how this goes. I'm going to make sure to give everybody some time to sign in, and away we go. So let's see this. I am going to make sure that it is showing up on my page, which I know it will. And there we are. So are you ready, Mike Spatola, for this incredible, scintillating, as I pointed out before, conversation?
I am all set, ready to go.
I don't know how long it's been that I have gotten to have an opportunity to talk to you in person. Certainly, I love Facebook for the opportunity to talk to you over social media, which is a blessing of social media. I think that everyone complains about how bad it is, but how great it is to connect with those people that have influenced your life before. And I think that for certain in my life, you certainly are one of those incredible influences that have, catapulted my dreams to where I am today. Some would argue that I'm in flux, but I would say that I'm definitely on a trajectory that I'm really proud of. So thank you so much for volunteering. Or after I asked you, you basically agreed to be on there, because I think this is going to be an incredible conversation, especially on Little Christmas, a gift to all who are going to check in and listen, and for certain for me. So I really appreciate you taking the time out of your night and your schedule and everything to be with Facebook, the Facebook community, my community, and whoever else is jumping on board tonight. So thank you so much.
Hey, it's a thrill for me too, Meg. Thank you so much for having me.
And I'm so happy that we figured out the technological. That makes me the happiest. Nobody knows like that little endorphin kick when it all is actually coming together and starting off. So I want to say once again, thank you. No fault.
I have to own that.
No fault here. Let me tell you, it's all a part of the process. So as we go forward, this is all a part of the process. So I do want to introduce you because your resume is amazing, and certainly not to suggest or even introduce you in this capacity, it would do this whole conversation a disjustice. So I want to start off by saying this is Mike Spatola. For all of you out there who benefited from an education where he challenged your mind and forced you to critically think about the world around you, I'm so excited to have him here tonight. And his story is even more profound because a lot of people impacted his life so that he could get to where he is on this journey. And I know there's so much more still going to come for him. I can just see it. I told him after this, he's going to be on Facebook Live all the time. So just you wait and see. So before we do go on, I do want you to choose a number. As I said, it's very intentional, these conversations, and I'd like you to set your intention before we even start. So go ahead and set your intention and then choose a number. And at the end of the interview, we'll come back to you and you'll actually get to see what you chose according to the book. So
I'm all set.
All right. So let me introduce Mike Spatola, everybody. When he was in school, in high school, he dreamed of being a teacher. So I guess this is about always knowing what you wanted to do, but not even a teacher. He was also a coach. In college, he left his basketball practices actually to transcribe drills and plays, envisioning how he would coach one day. And he credits his teachers and coaches for the influence that they had on his life that allowed him to enter the field of education, which is so important, especially nowadays, that we get good teachers and those teachers that influence others to want to actually educate others as well. So the influence they had was transformative, as he indicated. His college professors then sparked his passion for political science and history, which in turn was what he taught me, 20th century, and also what he became an expert on over the years. So I would love to know what you think about today's day. And I don't know if we'll even go there because I like to keep these on the mountain. So, you know,
we want to stay positive.
We have to stay positive. Yes, it's all about optimism and positive today with regard to manifesting. So for sure. So his teachers were mentally influential in his life, and his unceasing love of his family also was something that catapulted him to ignite a career that lasted 41 years, glorious years, he says, that spanned 5 states and 6 different schools. So for those of you who did start off at Trinity Prep with Mike, he was actually initially hired by Trinity Prep as his first school in Winter Park, and that's where I had the pleasure of getting to know him as a teacher. He spent 10 years at Trinity and then concluded his career, retired in 2018 recently, spending 11 years at Durham Academy in Durham, North Carolina. So in between, he did stints at Lake Howell High School in Florida and Lawrence Academy is a boarding school in Massachusetts. And I'm happy to say he is wearing the Boston College sweatshirt tonight. That's for my sisters, so they have a look for sure. Yeah, it's a plus. I love Notre Dame for sure. So anyway. And he did also teach at St. John the Baptist Diocesan High School, his alma mater, and Friends Academy, both in New York. Over the course of the 41 years, he earned several noteworthy recognitions for teaching and coaching. He was the Teacher of the Year at Trinity Prep, awarded a faculty chair in history, and voted ISL Boys Basketball Coach of the Year while at Lawrence Academy. He was voted commencement speaker twice at Friends Academy, received Durham Academy's prestigious F. Robertson Hershey Distinguished Faculty Award, and recently he was inducted into the Trinity Prep's School's Athletic Hall of Fame. Mike cites 2 mottos, and I do love this. This is wonderful. So if you're listening and you're taking any notes, I really, really want to share it. Make sure you take note of this. He has 2 mottos that served as motivational forces during his career. Author and historian Henry Adams once said, "A teacher affects eternity. He can never tell where his influence stops." In 1980, at a turning point in Mike's career, former legendary UCLA basketball coach, John Wooden, which many of you I sure know, wrote in a letter, "No spoken word, no oral plea can teach our youth what they should be, nor all the books on all the shelves. It's what the teachers are themselves." And then Coach Wooden closed that letter with, "He answers prayers," which I think is amazing. So I can't imagine starting off this new year any better and this new decade off right than to have a conversation with Mike Spatola. How are you tonight?
I am great, psyched, pumped, fired up to have this conversation.
Amazing, amazing. You know, I keep wanting to say Mr. Spatola because I feel like I need to respect you, but it's such a nice thing to have a different kind of relationship for sure. I know I'm not a 15-year-old anymore, so it's very good to have this awesome, great conversation, like I said, with you tonight. So thank you so much for joining. I know I did tell everybody your bio, but I do want you to tell a little bit about your story and how you arrived at this place in your life where you're actually experiencing the results of a 41-year outstanding recognized career by your peers as well as your students, and then what continues to guide you on your journey now.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to share this background information. My journey is, as you noted, actually began in high school, and I want to think it possibly began even a little bit earlier than that, maybe not as early as grade school, but certainly the junior high years, and then into high school. I just developed a goal to become a teacher and a coach. Today we might use the expression or the phraseology, pay it forward, because my experience had been so positive and so productive working with and associating with the teachers and coaches with whom I was blessed to have monitoring my growth and development. The other thing is, and sometimes this is overlooked, besides the teachers and the coaches who played a powerful role in my development, I just flat out loved school. Now, I will add, and this might be a shock to many of the students who had me who are viewing this conversation and this program. I was not a stellar student, but I did love, absolutely adore, the energy and the buzz that existed in the school building and in the classrooms.
Mm.
And then, of course, if you combine that with the role teachers and coaches were playing, my absolute love of going to school every day and enjoying every bit of it, while not being necessarily a stellar student, my love of sports, it made the goal to go into education a fairly easy one for me. And then, of course, as I was going through high school and then through college, particularly with regard to basketball, I was in fact transcribing things that occurred during the day. The other thing is, when I was in high school at St. John the Baptist, which is my alma mater, I just saw teachers, male, female teachers, lay people, and also the nuns. I'll throw them in there as well, the Dominican nuns and the Franciscan nuns. They loved teaching. And so their influence was enormous. I mean, I can't even repay the influence that those folks had on me. I also had, in terms of the process, an abiding belief in can-do and an unceasing willingness to run the marathon. In other words, I knew that with a political science degree and also a minor in American history, that it might be very difficult for me because of the licensing and being certified within various states, that it might be difficult to become a teacher or to land my first teaching job, if you will. So I just had this, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. Be patient. Patience certainly was a virtue. And I just refused to be put in the category of should have.
Oh,
I'd rather be put in the category of could have. Now, for those who don't know the distinction or what I mean by should have versus could have, I can sum it up this way. And I recently had an opportunity to Florida Southern College basketball reunion. Coach Donnelly, the men's basketball coach, invited me to speak to the basketball team after a practice. And I spoke about this in terms of their season and their careers. So should have versus could have. And I never wanted to fall into that should have category or be labeled that way. Could have is simply this. I could have been a great basketball player if I was 6'4", a lot quicker on my feet, had much better natural ball handling skills. I had control over that, or no control over my size and my quickness. But I worked my tail off to be as good as I could possibly be under the circumstances. The should have been category is I was and am 6'4". I didn't put in the time or the effort. And so you never want to be in the should have category. So in terms of my desire to be a teacher and to coach, I was going to go to any extent or length, which meant attending UCF on a part-time basis while I was teaching at Trinity Prep, and even beforehand, taking some courses while I was out of the teaching, so that I could in fact work towards a certificate in the state of Florida. So that's essentially it. I've always wanted to do this or do that, and my dreams were fulfilled. I just believe that you can realize those goals if you persist, you're resilient, you're patient, and you have a lot of help along the way.
Well, I think that one thing that I do recall with regard to you specifically is your passion. Like literally, your energy was aligned with your passion for teaching. I mean, it wasn't how history was, just reading out of a book, the droning on and on. It was history come to life. And I think that anybody who is a student of yours will concur with the fact that, first of all, you better be ready to go to class. You definitely don't want to show up unprepared, for sure, because you weren't having it. That is one thing that I remember myself and my Alicia Elski would sit hours like, we have to get to know this. We have to know this because Lord only knows. But the thing is, the fact is that you had so much passion for what you were doing and what you were teaching that regardless of whether we even enjoyed it or not, we wanted to come prepared. So I think that that's a beautiful gift of a teacher, for sure. And it certainly, I think that it's going to continue as a part of your journey, the passion, because I can see how you are engaging even on a social media platform at this point, where you bring to light certain characters of history that have impacted you and that you want to engage or at least introduce to people who might not be aware of them, which is a teacher's job, right? To
Yes.
inspire the curious mind. And that is what you're doing.
You have to ignite the spark
Mm-hmm.
in order to grab hold. I always used to say that, not necessarily to students, but that if I needed to, I'd get up on the table and dance to bring to life or to energize the room if necessary. Of course, the only thing I would add is that, particularly when you make reference to Alicia and yourself in 20th century American history, there are probably hundreds who are now, well, not necessarily hundreds right now, but there are probably out there hundreds who are saying, well, he just said that he was not stellar in the classroom, and yet the demands and the requirements on us, it's a two-way street here, and you can't have it both ways. But in any event.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. I think that this is what you're speaking to before about the influence of a good teacher, regardless of what your capacity was at the time. When if someone believes in your abilities, then you rise to the challenge. And I think that's what you did. So it's not really hypocritical to have, to force somebody to show up, because the process. And when you see the spark go off in a mind, it's a different experience altogether. And I can imagine that's the thing that teachers are looking for, right?
Oh, once you see that, once you cast the line, and once the hook is there, you run with it, and it makes all the work and
that's amazing.
All the frustrations and it's just great. Yeah,
that's amazing. And I want to continue because I know that you just recently retired after 41 years, and I know that leaving something that you love to do, having resigned myself after 20 is like leaving something that you really love and it's been a part of your life for so long behind. How does it feel for you, stepping into this new chapter of your life, like all these opportunities that are about to unfold, yet, having to say goodbye to at least that chapter?
Well, I'd be less than forthright if I didn't say to you, I felt and feel really good, actually, about retiring.
Okay.
Now, I would also like to add that those who know me well, whether they be family or friends, and I'm sure some of my colleagues at Durham Academy, with whom I became very close, whether they expressed this to me directly or not, they were deeply concerned about my retiring because so much of my life for 41 years, including a large amount during summers, was devoted to teaching and coaching. And the feeling was that without that, I would not know what to do with myself. And that's just that has not come to fruition, thankfully. So I feel really good about it. It was time. And thankfully, I was able to go out or to retire on my own terms. Now, let me just add this as an aside, because I don't take retiring lightly, particularly when, as my former head at Durham Academy, when I told him that I was not thinking about it, but going to retire at the end of the school year in 2018. I think Michael almost hit the floor because he looked at me and he said, there's a pool of people on this faculty I would put in the category of retiring and retiring soon. You are not one of them. You have the energy and enthusiasm of a 24-year-old, not knowing how old you are, but you do. And so I'm like shocked. And so I'll share with you briefly what I shared with him. I gave it a lot of thought because I knew the risk involved in retiring. There are certainly a lot of positives, but there are potentially the negatives too. And I just noted some that family and friends were concerned about. In my process of thinking, I thought about situations that might be analogous to my career in their respective careers. So, for example, Now, your dad will remember a football player by the name of Jim Brown. Jim Brown was a running back for the Cleveland Browns back in the 60s. He's actually originally from Manhasset, New York. He was a stellar football player and lacrosse player at Manhasset High School out on Long Island. But in any event, Jim Brown retired at a point in his career where, Meg, he was by far and away the best running back in the National Football League.
Okay.
And I would venture to say that he probably had another let's just say another 5 great years playing in the NFL. Jim Brown retired at the peak of his career. Now, here's another thing about Jim Brown, which is admirable. Jim Brown, when he retired, in the midst of all the criticism of sports fanatics like me who wanted Jim Brown to continue to play, and that's back when the Cleveland Browns, incidentally, were good. They're not very good now. Jim Brown actually became an actor. He went into acting. Now, okay, he was a C at best actor. But to think that he would take the risk and then endeavor to go into another profession and career is I think, noteworthy and admirable.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about Jim Brown. He's at the peak of his career, and I'm not saying necessarily that I reached my peak, although intrinsically I thought that I might be close to it.
Yeah.
He went out on his own terms. Another NFL player by the name of Barry Sanders, who was another great running back, another top 100 NFL football player for the Detroit Lions, did the same exact thing. And so they were criticized for that by those of us who wanted to revel in their greatness as football players. So there were 2 at the peak, and I could relate to that. Then, on the other hand, my Facebook friends, family, and whatnot will know that Willie Mays is by far and away my favorite sports hero as a kid growing up, and even to this very day. Well, Willie Mays is on the opposite side of the spectrum here with regard to this. Had a stellar career with the New York and San Francisco Giants, gets traded to the New York Mets. Now, there's something that was nice about that, ending his career in New York. But at that point, my hero, I felt sympathy, and not that Willie needs my sympathy, compassion, or pity, but Willie Mays was falling down in the outfield and had gone too far. And now to the colleagues to whom I was alluding to and we were mentioning earlier. Some of them, my colleagues, now 6 schools.
Yeah.
So I was in 6 schools where faculty thought about retiring or did retire or not retiring. Maybe should have. If I may, I will describe it this way. There were faculty members with whom I worked, they'll remain anonymous, who lost their fastballs. And so what they started to do was just started throwing curveballs and dinking and dumping. And I saw them sort of at the end of their careers becoming cynical and then critical. And I didn't want a Willie Mays situation. I didn't want to be a colleague who students were walking out of the classroom saying, he lost a little bit on a fastball. Or for parents, because like most people, like a Willie Mays and others, how many do we know in other professions?
Yeah.
They stay too long.
Yeah.
You can't stay that long. So you have to know when it's time. And that's why I say I'm okay with it. There's one last thing about that. I had the privilege, the year I was retiring, to deliver the what I'll call the keynote address at the senior dinner assembly. And it was on a Thursday night. The seniors were graduating on a Friday afternoon, and I was asked by the senior class to deliver the keynote address, and so I did. And I would like to make the distinction between joy and happiness. Now, I knew going into this address that I was going to experience a range of emotions, and those emotions would include, have I made the right decision because I've already announced my retirement? Or do I want to come back? You can only imagine this is a last moment for me too, because I'm graduating with this class.
Right. Oh, I love that though.
So I heard David Brooks noteworthy author and columnist the other day describe a situation that he experienced with his kids, between the joys he experienced and the happiness that he was observing them have. And I can attribute his to my situation that night. And so here it is briefly. So I get up there at the podium, and so I'm scanning the crowd, and it's a thrill, but I'm a little anxious. I'm a little nervous because of what might transpire as I go through this presentation, which incidentally I was told I only had 10 minutes. And I looked at the administrator who told me I had 10 minutes. I said, 10 minutes? I've waited 41 years to do this. You're not putting a time limit on this. Well, it lasted, I think, about 18 minutes. So I'm up there and I'm looking out at the audience, all of the seniors. And there are probably about 100, 105 of them and their families. And they are so happy. You can just see the happiness, 4 years of hard work at a school like Trinity Prep or Durham Academy. Yeah. And they've earned the right to be happy. Well, my feeling was one of joy. As I looked out at them, I just had this incredible sense of satisfaction, contentment, and joy.
Wow.
That I had reached a point where I probably, for those moments where I sensed that joy in what I had done with that class and at Durham Academy, and then over the course of the other 30 or so years, I said, I don't think it can get any better than this. And I made the right decision. And so it was sort of, again, on my terms, and I'm grateful for that.
Well, I have to mention the incredible synchronicity that the kid who didn't have the greatest grades basically got to make his valedictorian address on the 41st year of his teaching a creative assignment. So I think that's fantastic. And the fact that you said graduating, you do graduate when you move on to the next part of your life. So, graduare in Latin or Italian or whatever you want, is to take the next step, right? So take the next step. And we're all making these steps toward greater enlightenment. So like you said, if you're not throwing fastballs anymore and you have no desire to throw fastballs anymore, and you're possibly throwing curveballs, if that, or just like basically hanging it up until you're ready to go, then you're doing yourself a disservice, because everybody needs to have that next step, because we're not here to take up space. We're here to be curious, as we're discussing today. Right. And I think that, it goes to the next step, for your legacy building now, and how you're saying that you feel joy in your decision. And certainly you can tell from your pictures, you have joy with your family. Clearly, the joy is palpable, even via pictures. I definitely want to, engage with you. How does the love of learning things and this whole idea of becoming a motivational speaker, perhaps educational consultant, tie into this next chapter? And what kind of, inspiration or advice do you have for other people who are where, you were making that decision and where you are now that you have the opportunities to do the next thing?
Well, there are several things that I've pondered. Of course, it's just a year and a half in, and I'm knocking on wood, thanking the good Lord that I'm at a point where 65, very close to 66, is now what, the new 45. I want it to be the new 50. But I have my health, and so I have the opportunity to maybe not make a rash, quick judgment and decision as to what the next stage or step would be. And I don't want to take the time I have for granted. I used to joke with some students and say, when we'd be talking about maybe long-term goals or short-term goals, and they'd say, well, 20 years from now, I want to be. And I'd say, well, I really don't know how many 10 more years I have left. So therefore, not to make light of that, but life is so precious. Yeah. And while I have my health, I want to make sure that the next step, and once I dive in, Meg, I'm diving in the whole way. So I don't want to do something that is merely part-time, or I can't be there when necessary or needed. So, but there are several things I've thought about. For example, I get teased in some quarters of my family about my Facebook usage. Well, Facebook actually initially for me was a forum by which, or a platform by which I could reconnect with you, your sisters, students I had at Trinity Prep, Lawrence Academy. The number of people I've been able to reconnect with is so gratifying. And it actually makes my day to be able to communicate with people on a day-to-day basis that I had lost touch with, and now I'm in touch with again. And I think that's an important thing, to keep those relationships and connections alive. So it started out that way, and I think I've evolved over the time into providing posts that may address issues and things of a social nature, personal nature, that I care about. Our military personnel, combating addiction, racism, the state of education. But it also affords me the opportunity to, quote you and the magical guide. And to send out or post inspirational messages. To be uplifting, because that's essentially, people have done that for me. And I want to, again, sort of pay that forward and do that as well. So I look to do maybe not more of that, but certainly to continue doing that. With regard to speaking and consulting, I've thought about developing and conducting maybe workshops. I've been encouraged to do that, doing lectures with Q&A types of sessions at school assemblies. The next part of the legacy, you can relate to this. I've always wanted to write.
Awesome.
Writing is, I love writing, but writing for me is painstaking. It's difficult, challenging. Everything that I write goes through multiple edits because it has to be perfect. The speech that I delivered at the senior dinner in 2018, I can't tell you how many edits that went through. And I think it came off pretty well. But in any event, I've thought about doing that. As a continuous learner and somebody who wants to acquire, secure additional knowledge, remain a part of the learning community, I've actually thought about pursuing a doctorate.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Well, before I took the job at Durham Academy and was working in New York, I had actually started a doctorate in world history at St. John's University.
Okay.
Where I started my undergraduate work in 72.
Wow.
So I figured maybe I could go back and maybe but then I decided to take the job at Durham Academy, no regrets. And I don't know whether that's serious or on the docket, really, because of the time, the cost. And I have too much else that I want to conquer, possibilities that are out there. And as you well know, to pursue an advanced degree, it would go to my love of being a student and learning. And making up for maybe those lost years many years ago. But there are other things that I think would take priority right now. So, but there are things on the horizon I'm thinking about, and I'm sort of taking my time to just navigate all of this. And I think that's okay.
I think that the great thing about what you've said is that you have tremendous perspective, because you're saying, I think there's an incredible beauty of the whole generating of ideas, right? When you get that creative hit, you write it down and put it on your list, right? It's still your list, because as long as you say you have your health and you're willing to do, there's so many things that will give you that buzz that you loved in the educational field initially and that you find in life now, which is just the thing, right? People have, and I do say this because I think it's really important that people out there listen and hear. You might be at a place in your life where you might feel like, what do I do next? Depressed, perhaps, isolated, all of the same. and you're like, well, there's nothing more for me. What do I do next? And the thing is, what you just said is that, you move from one point of your life into this next one, and you see so many incredible possibilities waiting for you from more higher education, more, experiences through motivational speaking, educational consulting, all these other things. And I think that just by virtue of having the idea, which I think is the beginning of amazing things, right? The imagination that leads to the reality. I think that you can go so far, and there's nothing that will stop you except for yourself at this point.
Right. If I can also interject, those are outstanding points and so true. Anyone who's considering retirement, not that your followers are necessarily thinking about retirement, but for me, it's important. Two things are important. One is you need to remain physically active. That's certainly easy to do. For me, that's easy. With family and grandkids in particular, the hustle and the bustle, you're always going. I do like to bike ride. I do like to walk and try to mix in a little bit of jogging there.
I like that
when I can. So physically, I'm okay. It's making sure that intellectually you are pursuing things, that you are feeding your mind. Because if you stop doing that, then you might as well just become a couch potato. I can do it physically, but if I'm not reading or researching or engaging with someone such as you, there's a loss there. And I think that you just need to stay stimulated and engaged in both those realms, and then things work out for the best. Oh, and I'm going to show you this as well. I don't know whether you will see this.
Oh, that's awesome.
All right. Well, that's the other thing. I think when I've had students and parents at Durham Academy who want me to run for political office.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So that's another.
That's good. I like that.
Well, Meg, I don't know the atmosphere and the setting, the civility that's got to improve, the tolerance and all of that.
They always say a good teacher will step into the ring to stay authentic to the true self, integral to their character, right? That will bring the conversation to a different level, right? And I always say that I don't know if maybe your initial teachers would have told you that, but those that want things to change have to be those that set it in course in action. So I'm just saying, it might be a good idea. It might be a good idea. You definitely have your mind at a place where you know who you are, and no one's going to try to encourage you otherwise, and to play the game. Certainly you're not new to it. So that's very interesting.
Yeah, we'll see.
Well, I'm sure
that of course is money and time as well.
Well, I'm sure there'll be many people out there with, like my good friend Frank Daly says, we need a good man into the ring, which I definitely would second with regard to you, because you have the knowledge of history, which is very important, because if you don't know history, well, the bad things will repeat themselves.
So they will.
Unfortunately, some people are not students of history, and they will in fact not think that there are devils in the details, right? So I definitely think that's a great idea. That's like the best thing I could hear on Love of Fun. I can tell you that's a great gift. I don't know.
But it's also funny, all those folks who are endorsing and offering money to support my candidacy, I would say to them, well, I'm appreciative and grateful, but you have no idea where I stand on any of the issues. And a lot of times they would simply say, it's not about that for whatever your position. Right. It's about getting character back into governance.
Yeah, I would second that. I think that, it's interesting that, when we have conversations with a different bent, let's say, where I open the space to have you and I share, so that we get to a point of agreement of unity from the division, then we're going somewhere. And unfortunately, that's not the tone that's being set. So I would say that your friends are onto something. That is definitely good news for sure.
Meg, I don't want to be spitting against the wind or
no wind
into the wind or rowing against the current.
Well, I think that what
from New York, I can get down and dirty too.
Yeah, you know what? It's like don't take my kindness for weakness. Like, don't do that. And I say that as a lawyer. I'm like, listen. I hear what you're saying, and you might think that you're taking one on over me, but yeah, no. So I understand what you're saying as well. I want to go into that intention and mantra with regard to this being, you said this morning, you wrote on one of the posts with Little Christmas. And I like the fact that, this is the day of the three kings, bring the gifts. So I like to say that what you just said now makes me very positive and optimistic for the future. People like you are even considering moving into something like that. I think that that's amazing. It's certainly going to be an enlightenment challenge for you. It would be definitely. And I don't know, is your wife on the same page with that?
Well, listen. I can't say enough about the support that I have received from my life partner, confidant, the love of my life. You know, based on your family and your upbringing, what a darn good marriage is built on. And, again, we've been blessed. And when you think, Meg, it's not the 6 schools, although some people would eyebrows are raised with 6 schools. It's the 5 states.
Yes.
So how many times did I ask my wife to put her trust and faith in my decision, and my children, when we started developing a family, to do the same? So in any event,
you have a good woman by your side, I'll tell you that much. And she must be smart too, because my God, your children are running amazing things at this point. Em
is the smarter of the two. There's no doubt about that.
Well, I have to say that maybe one day I'll have her on my Manifesting with Meg show. I will be very honest. I do like the idea of saying the future is female. I think we get more minds out there. We'll have more of a balance. And certainly with people who have incredible character and with the energy that you have, coming to the table and having that incredible, energy buzz, vibration, so to speak. So I would love to talk to her one of these days. I would love it.
She could tell you some stories.
Oh, the stories! As a writer, I live for the stories. Oh my God!
When we left Florida and went to Massachusetts to the boarding school, Lawrence Academy, she packed up and went sight unseen.
Wow, that's amazing.
She was given a floor plan to the the dormitory and our apartment within the Sheedy Hall, which was our residence. But sight unseen, she just put her faith and trust in God and me.
Wow.
And we got on the road and went. So anyway.
She's definitely an adventurer, that is for sure,
She
right?
would be very supportive.
Wow.
But it would be something that I would, because as you well know, today, your family and your children get dragged through the mud. So I wouldn't, that would take an awful lot of additional discussion. And then what office do I want? I always want it to be like, I don't want to run for the local sheriff. Like, I want to run for the House of Representatives, or I want to run for the Senate of the United States.
Yeah.
And I don't even want to be president of the United States. I want to be like a senator from North Carolina. Or
that would be amazing.
A representative from my district. That's what I want.
Oh my God.
Like, I've paid my dues already.
Yes, amazing.
Put this political science degree into practice.
Yes. Oh my God. And have wisdom come out of the Senate again. Wow. How fantastic. How fantastic would that be? I do want to speak to the inside of today, for the actual insight for today for January 6th is entitled Forgiveness Promises New Beginnings, which I think is really kind of exciting when you think about this point in time of history that we're at. I think, looking at what's happened in the past and certainly what's happening internationally right now, I think that we're all, desperate for a little bit more optimism. Certainly, recognizing, like you said, that you're an advocate with regard to military and supporting our military and, what they do to put their lives on the line for all of us. Because, watching some of those pictures of having 3,500 troops go over to the Middle East right now, my prayers are with them and their family. Right. The biggest sacrifice that you could ever give for your country is to lay down your life for your fellow man. So, I'm seeing that, but at this point in time in history, the whole idea is how do we get past the stalemates and the ire and the hostility? I think forgiveness certainly is a good place to start. And I quote Dag Hammarskjöld, who is an author, diplomat, and economist. He said, "Forgiveness is the answer to the child's dream of a miracle by which what is broken is made whole again. What is soiled is made clean again." And I think that's a great quote to address what's happening in the world, because I think that we are clearly broken. However, there is an opportunity right now to be made whole again if we're ready and willing to have the conversations and move us in that direction. And certainly forgiving past harm by virtue of the words we choose for each other, or perhaps by how we treat each other. And that's why I think people are resonating with you so much, is because the character you have and emanates from you and your family, and to see your family and what kind of, level of, stature you raised your children in, and your wife, and the commitment that you both have together is amazing. So I want to play on that. And I think that, I would love to know, because maybe you are going to run for office, how do we heal, at this point in time in history, so that we can have a conversation that moves us forward? And I think, speaking to a world history professor, I think this is a great place to start.
Well, I love his quote, and you had shared that with me earlier. We are divided, we are broken. There's no question about it. But what I would say to that is, while it may seem that we are at our worst, because I'm sure for many it feels that way. When you see families divided, when you see friends parting ways, I saw it in school where kids and families would divest themselves of each other because of the divisiveness that exists. And it's so sad. And I think ultimately, for a country such as ours, it is in part shameful. But I guess what I mean to say is, while it seemingly is at its worst, and for us it might be in some cases, students of history know that the Civil War period was our greatest time of brokenness. And I do want to preface any further comments with regard to the quote and where we're going, or where we hope we'll go. I don't want to make any political commentaries, and I'm not campaigning now, folks. I'm just speaking from the heart, and what my sense is that's essential and necessary for us to forgive and to heal and to unite. So here are just some thoughts that I have. I think that there is an absolute need, a willingness to communicate and to engage in an honest, genuine dialogue about that which divides us, so healing can occur.
Yeah.
I feel very strongly about that. Without a willingness to listen and hear, not just listen, but hear each other, and trust, and speak truth to power, even if the truth hurts, forgiveness and unity will be hard to secure and establish or reestablish. So if I may, I've thought about this, and I don't know whether, and again, I'm not looking to get political, and I don't know what the socioeconomic or governmental situation is in the country of South Africa. But what I do know is that they, for me, are in large part a successful example of forgiveness and healing, because Nelson Mandela and South Africa engaged in the TRC, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission,
Yep.
which was an attempt to heal the wounds of that dastardly apartheid system. And they afforded people in South Africa the opportunity to come forward, ask for forgiveness, admit their guilt in asking for forgiveness, and for those who were victims to shed light on that victimization. And so I look at that and say, there's a reconciliation that's occurred, because now sometimes the people in positions of leadership have to take that initiative, whether it's parents in a family, or it's teachers in schools, or administrators with teachers, or governments. They have to take the initiative to set the tone and the tenor that way.
Yeah.
So I think that's great. I think too, we, the United States, are a unique example in several respects, if I may. First of all, the cultural diversity, which is beautiful to our situation, that does create separateness in a way.
Okay.
When we try to celebrate that cultural diversity. The demographic changes that we are currently undergoing and experiencing are painful for some. And I would even add, as well as the cultural diversity and the demographic changes, that our own federalist system, where there's a sharing of local, state, and federal authority, creates a divisiveness that is more challenging to overcome than in more unitary type systems. However, I attribute a lot of this. You're a student of history, and you are well aware of our European brothers and sisters, and in Asia and in Africa. Those are cultures that are centuries longer than our own.
Right.
And so I see the United States as still a young and developing experiment. And we're evolving, and we're going through some growing pains. And these struggles are part of the maturation process. I mean, just think of individuals as we grow older, and the struggles that we grapple with, and the challenges, decisions we have to make. Yeah. And then we butt heads with one another, or neighborhoods, or states. And so I find that if there's open communication and there's encouragement to have honest, genuine dialogue, that we can get through the muck of the differences and see what joins us. When I went to Russia many years ago, I was a product of the Cold War and the propaganda here in the United States, and certainly they were subjected, the citizens there. But when I visited and stayed with my Russian family, it was amazing the similarities that we had.
Right.
Parents, we had the same concerns locally, nationally, internationally. And we'd shake our heads over dinner and over maybe a few libations and say, why? This is so, it wasn't silly, it was serious, but we would say it's so silly. If we could just engage in a dialogue and see that we have so much more in common than we do differences. And here's the key. We have got to get to work at this.
Yeah.
But the work has to be based and rooted in a faith that this can be done. And here's my hope. Today's students and young people are key. Like things would come up in classes where we might be talking about racism, or we might talk about immigration. And my students would look at me like I had 5 heads. Like, we're not racist. We don't feel that way. Interracial marriage is not a big deal. Why are you making a big deal out of this court case? And it's just a normal. And so I'm so hopeful that whether it's interracial marriage or it's now a watering down of the dogma of doctrine of
Right.
Catholics can only marry Catholics and Americans can only marry Americans and or U.S. I'm so hopeful that our young people have it more together than the adults who are screwing everything up right now, much to the chagrin of you and me as we converse here. But I'm very, very hopeful. I'm not looking to rationalize any of this, but I do, like you, see a necessity of knowing the history, that we are not at our worst point.
Yeah.
But I'm also willing to admit that the reconstruction that we went through was an incomplete reconstruction because it did not lead to ultimate reconciliation between North and South and West, and between black and white. Right. And so that has to occur. And I've heard individuals, who's the great Reconstruction writer, American history writer, Eric Foner, write more recently that there may be a need for the United States of America to go through what would be classified as a second Reconstruction, and a real one, where there's forgiveness, there's healing, there's reconciliation. So whether South Africa becomes the model or not, we need to just not ignore this, close our eyes to it, but become activists. And I see a lot of young students who are tired of the crap. On the street, I'd use a different term or label, so forgive me. But I'm hopeful. I really am. I think it's a part of, gosh, we're only 200 plus years old. We still haven't gotten this right. But well, I see why.
Well, I do like what you said with regard to having a forum where we listen, hear, and trust that we're going to be respected. I think that point is a definite starting point. I think Stephen Covey said, first seek to understand, then be understood. And I think that when you the leaders to do what we want them to do, then we might be waiting a little longer than we need. I think that in a small ripple effect kind of way, we can start in our inter-community. I think at a community level. And I think what you're talking with regards to students as well, starting at that level, and you have the Greta Thunbergs of the world, and you have the activists from Parkland of the world, and they're starting a conversation, and hopefully it's exhausting to maintain that level of activism, but I think that maybe waking certain people up, and I think that's the whole idea, waking from the numbness, that you can be a part of the solution, and that there's many ways to do that without, going out, and doing something irrational, but, start rational conversation, even amongst our families. Let's start there. There's a lot of divisiveness in families nowadays, and I do love, and I wanted to tell you this because I wanted to point it out, because, after Hamilton, because I love theater, and I was raised in a Broadway family where we were constantly like more theater that incites conversations like that, where people get excited about learning more and understanding. And I think that that's a definite way where people can start to have these incredible conversations that you're
absolutely.
I want to make sure that I get to the part of this, because I want to help inspire other people to, start on this journey to, start to understand and seek to be understood, and get into the conversation where we start to heal the brokenness. So getting back to manifesting the life of our dreams and getting curious about that. And let me tell you, having conversations with people like you, these extraordinary people, that you can be the catalyst for so many people who, didn't understand perhaps before, but maybe are more curious now to look into it. So now it's time for us to manifest. So I want you to share with us what is important to you right now in your life.
Oh wow, you come up with some zinger, but you owed me. I readily admit. but I just want to say before responding that when I asked you to share some ideas or questions, so that at least I wouldn't ramble or go on these a million times, they were the ability to sit and think, to critically examine self and then the world around you. I greatly appreciate you served as my teacher there
Ah,
for a while.
wow. Ah,
And
that's a student becoming a teacher. I love that. I think I
yes.
can die happy now.
So those tough questions, I sat and I said, Mike, listen, you deserve that because of all those painful days you
Oh,
put
yeah.
her through.
Let
All
me tell
right,
you.
so what's important manifesting? What's important to me today? Of course, my family and my friends remain the centerpiece and my primary focus. As my family expands, that much more important. But my friends, and so I'll take all the teasing and razzing about social media and being on Facebook that people want to toss my way. But those friendships are so, especially when you reach a point where there are so many, I want to say hundreds, but maybe it's thousands, I'm not counting, students, colleagues, school administrators, students in particular who filled my life with great joy. And so it's very important for me to reconnect, to have those connections. And so each and every day, family, friends have to be the centerpiece and my primary focus. But I do have some other issues that are important to me. And again, this is such a positive engagement that I don't want to come off sounding negative because, again, I think ultimately I'm optimistic that with proper attention and concern, heartfelt and genuine initiatives, we can grapple with these things and solve them. But I'm very concerned about the kind of world that your children and my children and grandkids will inherit. There's no question about that. I'm concerned about the state of our educational system. I'm concerned about it in the lower levels, the middle school levels, high school, and even college. I'm concerned on, let's say, the middle school, and I guess we can even go into the primary grades. I'm concerned about teaching to tests as opposed to really addressing the joys of teaching the skills so that ultimately they become critical thinkers. And as John Dewey at one point suggested with regard to education, you have to prepare students for a democratic society, and that is you must prepare them to be citizens. So therefore they have to be decision makers, and they have to be thoughtful decision makers, regardless of what their opinions are. So I'm concerned about what's going on those levels. With regard to college, I'm concerned about the move. Maybe this even reaches into the high schools. I'm concerned about the cost of it. I'm concerned about its availability. And I'm also concerned about, all due respect to my natural science friends, but I'm very concerned about this strong initiative to STEM. And in terms of that emphasis, there seemingly is a de-emphasis in the social sciences and the liberal arts. And I'm a Vigerio disciple when it comes to the liberal arts. So, and I think while critical thinking certainly can be done on the natural science side, I just find that when you follow the liberal arts and you study the liberal arts, it prepares you to be a thinker and to grapple with not formulas or this is the answer and that's not the right answer. Let's go into a lab and but that we become more educated through the study of languages and cultures. And so I could go on and on about that. So I am concerned about that. I'm concerned about the safety and security of students and school personnel because of these mass shootings. And I personally do not, and professionally did not believe in arming teachers, but something has to be done so that when your kids and mine or my grandkids go to school, it's about the learning experience, and it's about the joys of learning and security and safety. And you're just taking away from teaching time. It's a necessity, but teaching time is lost when you constantly have to go through these procedures to keep them safe. And in so doing, you're almost exacerbating the concerns and the problems. And so I'm concerned about that. The incredible burden of our volunteer force. When I look at the statistics and I see that 1%, less than 1% of the population serves in our military.
Oh, yeah, I didn't realize that.
Many of them are doing multiple tours. There was a situation 2-3 years ago where there was one soldier who was going on his 11th tour of duty in Afghanistan and Iraq. My son served one tour of duty, and that was one too many. It was enough. So I'm concerned. The sacrifices are incomprehensible on their part, but also their families. My goodness. The suicide rate among our returning vets. What's now 22 per day? The VA treatment stateside is insufficient, inadequate. And it's not the people at the VA. We have a wonderful VA hospital right here in Durham, North Carolina. It's unbelievable, the service they're providing. But nationally, it's subpar, it's underfunded, it's overwhelmed. Plight of our Native Americans are concern to me because I spent time out on a Lakota reservation, taught a course at Lawrence Academy, an elective on the Plains Indians. And so that's a concern of mine. The homelessness, climate change. I mean, you name it. But again, while these are all, oh my gosh, the world is ending. No. It just takes, these are not insurmountable. They're correctable. It takes a galvanized nation and people who care, and we can get it done.
I totally love you articulating so many of your concerns, because I do believe these are the issues that we're grappling with today as a society. And to turn away and not look at it and actually shine a light where this darkness exists would be completely completely irresponsible. And certainly what you're speaking to with regard to how our children are going to experience this world. I mean, we can't ignore and put it and pass it off, to the next generation. We need to be a part of the solution, which I think is amazing that you're saying. And I love the fact that you're saying, I think in balance, like certainly with natural sciences and liberal arts, there needs to be a balance. We got to come at it at both angles, because that's thinking outside the box, and there's a collaboration rather than a competition there. So I definitely agree. Now I get to ask you the next question. What are the best tools or practices that you would use to start tackling these significant concerns that you have to start manifesting a more incredible journey and for our future?
Well, first of all, I think it can in fact start in the schools. And I think that what I have always loved to do, and it's sort of a takeoff on your reference to Hamilton. I always liked figures in history, and even within class settings, that created sort of that moral dilemma. Because I think when you consider some of the concerns that we share, that these can be considered ethical and or moral dilemmas. So how do I
love that.
A homeless person. All right. So I see a homeless person and I feel badly. And then I'm asked, or someone would ask, well, how do you plan on solving that? And I think what we need to do is take that tangible situation that I see on the corners of various streets in Durham and elsewhere. And I think we have to raise those issues up. Now, again, a lot of folks are going to disagree, to a moral question. Like, I have to bear a moral response. If I see that homelessness, or I see the treatment of a vet, if I see the fact that most of us are not asking to serve this country in any way, shape, or form. Look at the benefits that I have reaped from this country because of what service personnel have done for me on my behalf. And I have not lifted a finger. So I don't necessarily have to wear a uniform, but in some way, there needs to be a service that I can provide to countries. All right, so back to my point. I think if we can put these things on a moral, one of my favorite historical figures is Abraham Lincoln, and most folks know that I'm a Lincoln fanatic. And so I see a turning point in that war when the Union or the North, and folks will disagree with me on this, that Lincoln made it a moral issue. Slavery was a moral issue. Secession for him was a violation of his oath, the Constitution's preamble, but it was a moral issue.
Okay.
And once you can raise these very tangible things from superficial to moral and ethical questions. All right, now to the point. I think you can do that in schools. So, and through the educational process. Now, age appropriate, obviously. So I would like to always, when going through like Western Civ or European history or even American history or even government, speak to events or characters who confronted these moral dilemmas, and they had to make a choice.
Yeah.
They had challenges to their, where it's life and limb for many of them.
Yeah, no.
So, you know, for example, if you're talking about European history and you're talking about the English Civil War, and then ultimately you get to, let's say, the Reformation period, there are so many figures you can cite. So one of my favorite European historical figures is Sir Thomas More, St. Thomas More.
Yeah.
I mean, think about that. Loyalty to king. Are you going to swear allegiance to me via the act of supremacy? Or are you going to sustain your loyalty to this supreme being? And here's a man whose personal relationship with Henry and then professional relationship with him is at stake because of this dilemma that he has to confront. All right, so when that comes up, you see, there are learning opportunities that you can, activities that you can do in class, simulations, role plays, mock trials, debates. You can actually have students play those characters or those roles. And there are so many.
Though. I mean, think about it. In a school setting.
There's the content too.
Yeah.
You're learning the content, but you're also emphasizing skills along the way, collaboration, speaking, thinking, preparing arguments, persuasive speaking. It's just, and so.
Yeah, you're not done teaching, Mike, at all. I'm sorry. I don't know what you're thinking. I think that maybe that's perhaps a reprieve, but you're not done teaching. Because this kind of energy, when it comes to talking about having history come alive so people actually understand that these are living figures still, that people can like look at and actually, you know, the greatest movies, I always say, are those that when you leave the movie, the conversation starts, right?
Oh, yes.
So the greatest classrooms, and when you leave, then the learning starts. So even with regard to what you're saying right now, yes, I mean.
Hey, listen, here's another. So that would be like European. You could go to Michael Collins, who a member of the Irish Republican Army, not the more provisional recent one, but the one back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And Michael was an advocate of obviously a free and democratic Republic of Ireland separated from England. And Michael Collins, with the blessing of the IRA, went to England, negotiated a treaty that wound up in the separation of North and South of the Republic and the part that belongs to England. And Michael Collins winds up, he's doing the best that he can, and he knows that his life is on the line. Well, he comes back and he's assassinated because of the decision that he made in that peace arrangement or that peace treaty. I mean, think about also something as simple as the Plessy case and Justice Harlan's dissent in that case in 1896, when Harlan, and you'll appreciate this studying law, where Harlan is talking about a colorblind society.
Yes.
He's spitting against the wind in 1896. It's a brilliant dissent, and one that serves as the basis and foundation for Brown in 54.
Yeah.
But so he's confronted with a dilemma of where's America going? Where do I see America going? My own heartfelt, sincere, genuine feelings about this issue, and constitutionally, what's right, what's wrong.
Right.
And he makes his decision a minority decision that is one of, I think, one of the greatest dissents I've ever read, and certainly shared with students. So what would you do if you were in that same position, being empathetic, putting yourself in 1896? Don't talk to me about, I would have made the same dissent again. Yeah. Well, baloney you would have. And so you have to challenge them to think. And what's the moral issue in question here when you think about the separation of races in the United States? And so I always found that was very helpful, and I think that gets students, kids, youngsters thinking in a direction so that ultimately when they are decision makers, and they're decision makers earlier than ever now, and with broken families, they have to make a lot of decisions in some cases on their own. Yeah. They're the adults in the family. You want them being able to be reasonable in that decision-making process, right or wrong, that they've put the data together and they've weighed these. I mean, even in history, you can take A Man for All Seasons. You can take historical novels to teach a class, where now you see what George Washington and Franklin and Adams were experiencing as human beings. Now, we're in a different age, but we're confronting some of the same types of decisions. I mean, Washington was a traitor. He could have been executed for what he did. I learned a funny story.
But today I don't think of it like that. Like, honestly, it's just, like the guy took a leap, man. Like, seriously.
Oh, you're darn right you take a leap. Now, if we are asked or need to take a leap today, are we taking it? Or are we just sort of, going along with the crowd?
That's what you're saying about, what kind of moral compass do you have? What kind of and what kind of knowledge do you have at the time you're making the decision, the best decision that you know how to do? So those elements come into play. But certainly when you say about the educational system, give them the education, the best education that they can have to base upon these very significant decisions that they're going to be faced with in the future. And I totally see, but it's fascinating to me to think that, you try to live in like a bubble, literally. Like, we can't live in a bubble. There's no bubble. It's like, history repeats itself. We all know that. We still are tackling the same issues as we are, just with different lenses at this point, different clothes, maybe we're even reverting back to the fashions of before. But the bottom line is, we're still facing the same issues. The human condition is not changed.
That's right.
It's the same. The thing is, where does the passion lie in your life to start looking at the issues outside the box rather than within, and taking those leaps of faith with bravery, right? You're not done teaching. I can't. This needs to stay. I don't know what you're going to do. I don't know. And I can't wait to see what it looks like, because I think that you have so much to offer. At the same time, I think that because you have a curious mind, which is what we're going to be like wrapping up with, that your dreams will realize accordingly. Because when you start to get curious about the situation and the solutions around, you can see and attack the problems. Everything changes. Like, everything changes. Right. And maybe that's the first move toward a more sane society where we accept diversities, we find the union, the unity in those differences, so that the conversation can continue, because we don't want everyone to be cookie cutters. How boring is that? And that never works. That never works. You can't smash out the uniqueness of the human being. It just can't.
Absolutely.
I think
there are universal rights and privileges that each and every one of us as human beings have.
Yeah.
And it has nothing, on a more personal level. I was born and raised, baptized a Catholic. I married a Protestant. We have a Jewish member of our family. As a matter of fact, I believe more than one. We're not necessarily multiracial just yet, but it would not bother us in the least. And the reason I point that out is simply because ultimately, when we sit down and break bread, figuratively or literally, there's a commonness among us. There's a universality about what is right, what is wrong, what we all deserve to have. And so there's dialogue there. It does not negatively impact, nor does it affect me to attend an Episcopal service or a Lutheran service, or to go to a synagogue, or to go to a mosque. As a matter of fact, having done all of those things, or to an Orthodox church, having done all of those things gives me a greater appreciation and understanding of, and hopefully an opportunity to bridge some gaps. The greatest thing I ever did was go out on an Indian reservation and spend time there.
I love it. I didn't even know you did that. You never told me that. That's amazing.
Yes. Well, here's the thing. Also, when I was at Lawrence Academy, the curriculum had a program called Winterim. Lawrence Academy was on trimesters, and so we would go through our first trimester, our second trimester, and would before we entered our third trimester, there was a maybe 2.5 week period called Winterim. And it afforded each teacher the opportunity to develop a program that would speak to our own curiosity, our own desire for increased knowledge and wisdom. So we would create these courses. And the students then would ultimately choose from those courses. They'd enter a lottery if necessary and choose the courses that they too felt would expand their wisdom, knowledge, and speak to their curiosity as well. Well, twice to Russia, twice to Ireland, Italy, and to the Indian reservation. And of course, I'm teaching these things, and to go, and everywhere we went, I insisted on homestays so that the students were immersed with the families.
I love that.
And as a matter of fact, one time we went to the Celtic part of Ireland, the western part, the extreme western part, out by the Dingle Peninsula. That was amazing. And then you're dealing with, like, it's a pub culture, so how do you grapple with that? But it breaks barriers down, and so sort of this understanding.
You can't hate someone that you know. That's the difference. Like, literally, you cannot scapegoat someone who you've actually gone to their house and broken bread with, right? It's
absolutely right.
A total different experience when you see someone eye to eye, rather than hearing about what someone else tells you who they are. And I think that the most incredible thing that I think that anything a teacher, and especially you, specifically you, can do is to encourage the students to be on a mission to keep learning in life and never cease. And I think that once you maintain the mentality of, like, graduating to the next level and the next level of your education, your knowledge, your wisdom, and then paying it forward, like we said at the outset of the conversation, being in service to that higher good. I think that even that's something that I think even Aristotle would agree with, that the goodness. I was reading about that today. The goodness is what everyone strives for, and in ultimate, the joy that what you had gained, standing up there, looking out at a group of people, feeling the accomplishment of your years, and knowing that your journey's not over, which is fantastic. Which is going to bring me back to the beginning of our conversation, which has been awesome. I could talk to you forever. where I asked you to set an intention for the conversation and match it to a number. Choose a number.
Oh, wow. Okay. I do have an intention. And my intention was to, as it always has been, to inspire by what I say and what I do, at least endeavor to do that. That's the goal, the mission. And to work hard. And if through that hard work and the ability, hopefully, to inspire through the energy and enthusiasm, that you bring some degree of happiness and joy to others. And I know that doesn't necessarily always work in a given classroom setting or family setting, but that's the mission, that's the intent, that's the goal. That every day, and that's, Meg, why I love teaching so much, because every day was a new day. The intention was always the same, and I think for most students, their intention was the same as well. And while you do have to be flexible with that intention, because as you well know, in a school setting, anything can develop, and you do have to be somewhat flexible. But regardless, so game plans or lesson plans might be tossed out the window, but the bottom line is, regardless of what those circumstances bring, you're bringing energy, enthusiasm, effort. Amazing. You're bringing your passion to the endeavor. You're working hard. And it's not, hey, you work hard and I don't work hard. Like, I'm going to lead you to the fountain if I need to, and hopefully you'll voluntarily take the drink, and I don't have to sort of drown you to get you to drink. But, if you're doing it right, then they're following, and maybe even at some point you're leading from behind. But you always, and my goal was always work hard, bring the energy and enthusiasm, and your goal has to be to inspire. And if you can reach one or two, and hopefully it has a snowballing effect, you're reaching more. And over time, over that 9-month period or 10-month period, you're reaching more and more. More oftentimes than not, they're on board. And so lesson plans can go out the window, but the goal, the intention was always the same. And that really did not change. Now, the problem with that sometimes, and certainly I was probably guilty, accused of this, passionate people sometimes can come off overly demanding, too structured. Oh, there are all sorts of labels that have been applied through the years. And you know what? I wear them, and it's okay, and I understand. And I would always try to assess as I grew older and more confident, had my own children, and certainly grandkids have softened me a lot. As a matter of fact, this is funny. A couple of years ago, one of my last years of teaching, a couple, I want to say, I think sophomores, they at the end of class, and I was so fortunate to finish my career at Durham Academy. It reminded me so much of Trinity Prep. And you develop great relationships in a small class setting or a smaller school. And so I'd like to think that I had great relationships with so many students. And so a couple of sophomores came up to me one time and they said, "Oh my gosh, Mr. Spatola, you just," and this is what they're doing. You're just so enthusiastic. Do you ever take a rest and a breath?" That's what ultimately came out of one or both of their mouths. And I just laughed, briefly laughed, and then serious. I said, "Heck, you should have seen me when I was 24.
That's awesome.
So in other words, but sometimes that can be taken the wrong way. But once I think you get to know me, or you stick out the course, you find that he's really a sergeant at arms, a master sergeant at the beginning, but in the end, you strip away a lot of those symbols or clothing, and you wind up seeing this real teddy bear underneath. So.
I think the coolest thing is that you like instill some sort of discipline to the trade of learning, and then since they kind of, enthusiasm is contagious, then it becomes a dance rather than a battle. I think after a while. But what you said initially was like you want to inspire, and that just means breathe life into people, and that's what it does when you want to educate someone. It really opens the light. It opens the life, and I think that's beautiful. So
they also have to see your humanity too.
Oh well, yeah.
So and probably as a younger teacher, I was less apt to share myself. And you grow older, more confident and experienced, and you can pick those times or those moments when it's appropriate or purposeful. And it would get to a point where even with basketball and or football players, if I was brought to tears, I was not going to mask or hide that I was emotionally brought to that level. I think it was important for them to see that side or that humanity.
Yeah.
Because it's not weakness whatsoever. It was at the moment in that time, and it was purposeful. And so a lot of times you're dealing with students' tragedy or an athlete's tragedy. Wow. And you have to have that empathy and compassion. And if you truly love them, and there are very few, if any, I didn't love. Yeah. They may not have thought I did. So that's all part of it. And then you have a captive audience, and it's a lot easier to. So they could come in and tell me I hate history. Okay, that's great. Guess what? Give me a few weeks. Give me 9 months, and but anyway. So
let me ask you. I'm curious. What was the number you picked along with your intention?
I picked, let me see, what number did I pick? I had a few that I wanted to pick. I picked number 24.
Okay, so read number 24 for the manifesting audience tonight.
Number 24. So this might be a little bit further ahead date-wise, but that's okay, right?
That's okay, yeah. No, the number is according to what your intention was. So...
okay. There are no mistakes, no coincidences. All events are blessings given to us to learn from. And I thought that's on page 26 in the Magical Guide.
Yeah.
I thought that would be very apropos for what I was going to go through and experience. With great affection and gratitude. And there are no mistakes, no coincidences. All events are blessings given to us to learn from.
There you go.
I just love that.
Yeah.
The other one that I love too is the leap of faith.
Oh yeah.
I have to tell you that if folks don't have this, you're nuts. You've got to get your copy.
Well, I appreciate the plug for sure. I have to tell you, it's coming on 9:30, so we could talk for another hour, I think. But I just want to say, I definitely agree that we are where we're supposed to be in this life. And at this point in time, this conversation was definitely something that I needed to have. And actually, I'm sure many people probably benefited from immensely. I definitely want to thank you so much for giving me your time tonight. This was fantastic.
Oh,
I always love a conversation that piques the curiosity, and certainly this did not fail to basically provide that. So I want to thank you so much for your time tonight, and your wife, tell her as well. Thank you for letting me you tonight. I do want to give people in the feed, your information in case anyone wants to continue the conversation with you.
Sure.
Certainly, I love this idea of how you want to educate the future generation. So I encourage anyone who's in the educational field, if they're looking for someone who wants to completely enthuse and get people inspired, Mike Spatola is definitely one for the books. That is for sure. The legacy will continue. I know it will. In Congress, in the Senate, who knows? I just know that you are not done yet. So thank you so much. What an incredible opportunity it is for me to have this truly blessing to have a conversation with you after so many years. You taught me so much, and I, am grateful to have you here to, educate and teach as many people that I love out in the Facebook world, certainly. So as always, my final inspirational word goes to you. And like I said, you can connect with Mike on Facebook. I'm going to put all the information in the feed afterwards, and where you can contact him, whatever you're willing to allow. You tell me, and I'll go ahead and I'll,
Yes, you are more than welcome to do all of that. Thank you.
So your final inspirational word, inspire us, send us off into the world as Carpe Diem with something to bite into, right?
You got it. There are two things I would like to share in closing. Well, and first of all, thank you so much. This has been
great.
A blast. It's been a blast. And to reconnect with you. And again, let me
yes, I love
go
it.
Go BC Eagles. All right. I told you, had I not left Massachusetts, I was going to pursue a draw. Yeah. But anyway, there were two thoughts that I would like to share with you and with the viewers. The first one is one that I shared during that senior presentation, that's senior dinner at Durham Academy for the graduates, the class of 2018, and it goes like this. In 2015, I believe, was the year, in a commencement address, Denzel Washington, who is like my favorite actor,
yes, awesome,
told the graduates, and I quote, "When you get it," and what he meant by get it was your goal, their goal. "When you get it, reach back, pull someone else up, each one, teach one."
I like that.
Don't just aspire to make a living, aspire to make a difference.
Oh, I love that.
Matter of fact, when I shared that night, I was on the verge of tears, because it's so moving to hear him. He's just an incredible actor, but to be so genuine and sincere when he shared that. It's one of my favorite, and oftentimes I want to remind myself, it's not just about making a living. It's going out and making a difference.
I love that.
In the lives of others and your own. And then there's one last closing that I would like to share, because I think we should never lose sight of this. None of us should lose sight of this. And so I'm going to directly quote it off of notes that I have here.
Okay.
I'd like to quote Dr. Michael Nocero, your dad.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Where your dad, and I know you've shared this before, your dad has said, "Don't count out the seemingly ordinary, because that is where sparks of extraordinary begin. Therefore, I close this off and encourage everyone to seize the day, not only seize it, but seize it with gusto."
I love it. Wow.
I love you, kiddo.
Thank you.
Much.
Oh my God. Oh my God. That's beautiful. Wow. Well, I think that we definitely set out to do what we meant to do, is start our January in an incredible way. Thank you again, Mike, for this.
A better way to start.
Amazing. I'd like you to all remember that you're here to be deliberate creators of your life. Let your soul be guided by your dreams, and let's all together raise the positive vibration on this planet so that we can all live in bliss and joy and accomplishment, and enjoy the magic in your miracles. shine your beautiful light. And until next time, manifest the most beautiful light you can imagine. Carpe diem. Let's do this, shall we?
Love you, Meg. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Be well.
Everybody. Good night. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.